Mexicans launch friendly defensive to deflect U.S. tariffs. Mexico City. Mexican officials have copied a page from Donald Trump's playbook in recent days, taking to Twitter to communicate that they are working flat out to de-escalate tensions over immigration and avoid punitive tariffs on all Mexican exports to the U.S. Announcements of meetings in Washington, selfies, and carefully crafted messages of optimism for cool-headed discussions are some of the tactics on display in social media to respond to an economic and diplomatic emergency that few anticipated. Trump's threat on many are questioning the legality of mixing immigration policy goals with trade retaliation, and U.S. business groups are already considering legal action against the proposed tariff, arguing that the countries both produce for each other and together. Almost. Ortiz Mena said he spent much of the weekend on phone calls and crafting strategies to advise clients in the U.S.-Mexico supply chain on how to navigate the situation. His advice to were: Mexico overtook Canada to become the top trade partner for the U.S. in April. And Mexico's message has been consistently friendly. President Andrés There has also been some expert trolling. Foreign Minister Mexican Economy Minister Graciela Marquez said she will meet with Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in Washington on Monday. Ebrard said Mexican Agriculture Minister Victor Manuel Villalobos also is to meet with his U.S. counterpart, Sonny Perdue, as tariffs would severely affect the U.S. agricultural sector. The objective is Mexico is the top export market for U.S. corn and pork, and Mexico supplies 1 out of 3 fresh fruits and vegetables consumed in the United States. Tariffs on Over the weekend, Mexico's economy minister joined what Mexican Twitter users have dubbed the Ebrard. The Mexican strategy of killing with kindness has been met with skepticism and increasingly harsh words from Trump. Mexico. That followed an earlier tweet in which Trump labeled Mexico an abuser that takes but never gives to the U.S. He threatened to lure U.S. companies and jobs back via tariffs unless Mexico stops what he called an invasion of drug dealers, cartels, human traffickers, people smugglers, and immigrants. The addition of drugs to the complaint adds another layer of complication to negotiations. Mexican authorities have raided migrant caravans traveling through the country's southern states of Chiapas and Oaxaca this year. They have deported Meyer expects U.S. officials will again push this week for Mexico to sign on to a complete militarization of Mexican borders is also a very tall order. Just as over the weekend, the Associated Press witnessed migrants arrive in small batches by raft at Tapachula, a border town in Chiapas. Federal helicopter, but the AP also has seen a migrant woman and 2 children pulled from a bus in recent days to be transported to a detention center. Residents of those passing through Mexico without transit visas, have opted to maintain a low profile over the past weeks as Mexico seeks to detain and deport more migrants and to draw attention to those efforts. The National Migration Institute tweeted a picture Saturday of a plane transporting 64 Cubans back to their country from the Gulf state of Veracruz. Trump says he will impose a 5% tariff on Mexican goods beginning June 10 as a way to force the government of Mexico to keep mostly Central American migrants from crossing into the U.S. He says that until he is satisfied with Mexico's results, the import tax will be increased 5 percentage points every month through October, topping out at a total tariff of 25%. Yet there are no concrete benchmarks for Mexico to prove that it is stemming immigration flows. Mick Mulvaney, acting White House Chief of Staff, said on Fox. El Pez Obrador said Mexican officials will try to better communicate their immigration efforts in Washington this week. He issued a memo. He closed the letter by saying let Associated Press photojournalist Marco Ugarte in Tapachula, Mexico, contributed to this report.
Raindrops, hot. I keep fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up